Fox News Podcasts presents the Bret Baier Podcast with Fox News chief political anchor Bret Baier.
This week, anchor of America's Newsroom, Bill Hemmer, was allowed an exclusive look at a newly constructed aid site inside Gaza, the first time foreign media has been granted access to the region since the conflict between Israel and Hamas began late 2023. Shortly before Bill's visit, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu floated plans to launch a full occupation of Gaza, but a Security Council meeting scheduled for Tuesday to discuss the issue was postponed amidst growing concerns surrounding the plan's feasibility.
It's in the far southern part of Gaza, right along the Egyptian border, on the outskirts of a town called Rafah. That town has been reduced to rubble. There is very little, if anything, that stands in Rafah today. We drove for 5 miles. Nothing is left.
Meanwhile, back at home, the fight for a congressional majority continues to escalate, with Texas Republicans calling for the arrest of dozens of Democratic congressmen who fled the state in an attempt to stall the vote on a revised district map. California Governor Gavin Newsom, a Democrat, applauding the absent Democrats on social media, following up with threats to redistrict his own state in retaliation if Texas continues its redistricting efforts. For this and more, we'll bring in our panel. Republican strategist, co-founder of the South and Hill Strategies, Colin Reed, former deputy campaign manager for Seth Moulton's presidential campaign, former State Department spokesperson Marie Harf, and Fox News Radio Washington correspondent Jared Halpern. Jared, the Gaza situation seems to be coming to a head, with the Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff apparently having conversations with President Trump at the White House today about expanding dramatically the aid efforts inside Gaza.
President Trump has made clear that he has been alarmed at the images that have been shown from Gaza. Those images of children in particular are ones that President Trump has talked about. He says there does need to be more to get that aid in. And while the United States certainly seems to be committed to increasing the amount of money spent to get that food to where it's going, so far, President Trump has relied on the Israelis to make sure that that aid gets delivered, gets to where it needs to be. You have seen now European countries step up those shipments as well. But it is clear that this conflict has taken on a new urgency for this president, who has shifted away from kind of talks of a ceasefire. You've seen Witkoff and others say that the Hamas won't negotiate in good faith, and that they will now look at an alternative path to free hostages and provide relief to the people of Gaza. What that looks like remains a big question mark, but certainly the conversations happening amongst the Israeli government would indicate a dramatic shift in the way that this war may be prosecuted.
Yeah, Marie, this is an evolution, how we've seen the president deal with the situation and specifically deal with the Israelis.
It has. And I also think that what's become increasingly clear is that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu doesn't care a whole lot about certainly what the world thinks of how he's prosecuting this war. And just in the last few weeks, public opinion in the United States among supporters of Israel in many places around the world has really shifted against Israel as we see these horrific photos of starving people, children, babies in Gaza. So I think Prime Minister Netanyahu is very focused on either the occupation and or the destruction of Gaza. Just this week, we also saw in the past few days another horrific video that Hamas released of an Israeli hostage, emaciated, underscoring that there are still hostages there that have not come home and that need to come home. But Netanyahu, I think, is really focused on taking or destroying Gaza, even though the threat from Hamas has in large part been neutralized. The Israelis have been enormously successful at taking out Hamas fighters, Hamas leadership, and it really remains to be seen if he will be persuaded by President Trump or Steve Witkoff or anyone else who says to him, look, you cannot be responsible for the starvation of these people. Israelis now are standing up and saying, this is not okay. Netanyahu has been sort of unmoved by that. We'll see if that changes. And huge kudos to our colleague Bill Hemmer for being on the ground and giving us these images and showing us what's happening. It's so important.
Yeah, it is important to have a view there. Colin, obviously, Netanyahu says that they are, trying to get food in. He pushes back against the starvation, or that they're trying to starve people, and puts the onus, obviously, on Hamas terrorists, not only holding the hostages, but also taking and stealing some of the aid. That said, this is a hinge point, it seems, here, and how it goes really will determine what the next months look like.
Well, I agree with Marie on one point. Incredible reporting by Bill Hemmer and the entire Fox team being on the ground and shedding light on this situation that to date has been largely kept from the public. But where I disagree is this. On one side, you've got Hamas, who denies the right of Israel to exist, who started the fight on October 7th and is deliberately starving people to the point of emaciation. And if they could, would conduct a genocide against Israel and do everything they could to wipe them off the face of the planet. And that's Hamas's point of view. So the idea that this is ending up, all this blame is ending on Israel's doorstep from the international community, I don't think Prime Minister Netanyahu is really that concerned about it, because he's been really crystal clear from the beginning that he's got three goals. One, defeating Hamas. Two, getting his hostages back. And three, ensuring Gaza no longer poses a threat to Israel. Those are his goals, and he's been steadfast in his desire to see those through. Now, as it relates to President Trump, his goal, whether it's here or in Ukraine or anywhere else around the world, is remarkably consistent when it comes to foreign policy. President Trump believes in peace. That's his North Star. That's the goal he's always striving toward. And in this fluid situation, it seems as though he's about to get more involved to bring that to a head. And and that's where things are going, and that's what President Trump's goal is, and because he doesn't like seeing these images coming out here. But the idea that this is all landing, the entire blame is landing on Israel's doorstep, it doesn't pass the smell test.
Panel, we'll hold it right there.
All right, turning to the U.S., this redistricting battle in Texas, Democrats leaving Jared to try to slow it down. Eventually, they're going to have to come back and be a part of a vote, one would think, without some consequences.
Yeah, Governor Abbott can call special session after special session. We've seen Democrats use this before to raise the profile of redistricting. In fact, one of my very first jobs in radio was in the early 2000s at a station in Dallas-Fort Worth, when Democrats from the State House went to both Oklahoma and New Mexico to put off a redistricting vote. But it raises the stakes. It is now a national conversation. And Brett, it seems like if Texas moves forward on this redistricting at some point, it sets off an arms race with what you've heard from California, with what you've heard in New York, with what you've heard in Kentucky and other states. And it goes to show really how powerful redistricting has become, certainly as gerrymandering, I think, has become the norm for both parties. We have such few competitive House seats in relation to what it looked like even 20 or 30 years ago, that this just seems to be now the status quo, and we are seeing it play out in real time. And if Texas does this, you are certainly going to see other states do the same. Notably, it is a California Republican in the House of Representatives who has legislation to stop this. It would make a federal law that we don't do this mid-decade redistricting. Now, this is a congressman that in California could very well be drawn out of his House seat if California moves forward. But I wonder if this sort of tit for tat that now is being bantied about is something that raises the idea, maybe on a bipartisan level in Congress, to say maybe there is a role here for the federal government to rein this in a little bit. Certainly the courts have said that this is fine so long as these lines aren't drawn along racial or ethnic lines. And so it does raise the question about how far this goes and whether or not there is a federal response.
Yeah, Maria, it is consolidating for Democrats. They get something to rally around and against heading into 2026. But let's be honest, a number of blue states have done redistricting the other way, with Democrat lines, and it has happened. This one may be consequential in that, it could potentially save the House Republicans the majority.
Right. I mean, it's interesting, Brett. Gerrymandered districts across the country in red and blue states are among the most undemocratic part of our system. They have these districts that are not any shape occurring in nature. If you look at the maps, they are comical. It is clear that people are trying to protect incumbents. It's also very interesting. You're right. A lot of people on both sides like redistricting when it helps them, but it has been very interesting to see President Trump, Republicans just very openly say, we have a small majority. We need to cook the books to win it, to keep it, to hold it by getting more Republican seats. And I absolutely think Democrats are right. We cannot say, oh, well, we hate redistricting out of some principle. This isn't a purity contest. We have seen at town hall after town hall. We saw one in Nebraska this week. Voters are mad and they're fed up with Republicans in the House. And so we cannot sit back and say, oh, we're going to win just on ideas and fighting in the court of public opinion when Republicans are trying to change the rules. And so you'll see, I think, certainly California, Maryland is looking at it, New York is looking at it. There's a lot of places that are considering this, and Republicans might be playing with fire here and encouraging Democrats to do things we wouldn't have otherwise done.
Yeah, Colin?
Well, first, Brett, as it relates to the Texas lawmakers fleeing the state, I don't think there's a lot of people out there who have a whole lot of sympathy for lawmakers who don't like what's going on at their jobs, so they decide to fly off to a different part of the country. That's just not something that the everyday person's really going to get. If they're tuning in right now and then grandstanding in front of the cameras, ironically, in states like Illinois that are some of the most gerrymandered states in the country. So, look, these guys should get back to work. If the Texas legislature if these Democrats could win more elections in Texas, they'd have a little more power. They wouldn't be in this position they're in. They'd be able to actually affect the levers of government, and that would be an easier way to accomplish their goals here. But look, what this really is about is control of the House. And President Trump's been crystal clear. He doesn't want to lose control of the House. You can't really blame him after what happened in his first term when he was impeached twice and all sorts of investigations. And the Democrats, I'm sure this time around, if they do win the House back next year, will make life a living hell for him like they did last time. But I got to say this, underestimate Speaker Mike Johnson at his own peril. Time after time after time, he has pulled a rabbit out of a hat. And it's quite possible that even as slim as the Republican majority is right now, Speaker Johnson could find a way to hold on to that majority, not just because the incumbents that are running in these blue parts of the country have been through this ringer before, guys like Mike Lawler in New York who know what it's like to run and win in tough districts, but also because the Democratic brand is so bad right now. And you've got Joe Biden and Kamala Harris out there still dominating the headlines. Wall Street Journal poll had the favorability rating of the Democratic Party at a 35-year low. If they keep plummeting down there, it's possible the Republicans are able to overcome all the headwinds they're facing and defy history and hold on to the House next year on their own accord.
Yeah, and Jared, obviously the Senate is a different map as they fight that. The Republicans are positioned fairly well. But we're a long way from 26, and a lot can happen about how people feel about their own economy, their own economic situation, and where the country is.
Yeah, a lot of the 2026 races are going to fall on those economic lines. You're absolutely right, Brett. And I think that's one of the reasons, redistricting aside, that what you have heard Democrats talk about and has come up at some of these town halls are the impacts of the one big beautiful bill. Democrats really believe that that is going to be a winning issue for them. They believe that it is going to have some real effect for voters. Now, Republicans believe the same thing. You've heard President Trump again and again say he wants Republicans talking about the bill. He wants Republicans talking about tax cuts, wants Republicans talking about border enforcement. Conversely, you're going to hear Democrats talk about Medicaid. You're going to hear Democrats talk about SNAP funding and other issues. So I think you're right. I mean, redistricting has certainly made House races far less competitive, to Marie's point. But the issues are going to be the issues that they always are, which is not going to be how maps are drawn, but how people feel about their own economic well-being.
All right, panel, thank you. Now for a bit of history. On August 5th, 1936, track and field athlete Jesse Owens made history at the Berlin Olympics, winning the 200-meter sprint in a world record time of 20.7 seconds. That victory marked his third gold medal of the Games, and he didn't stop there. Owens went on to win 4 golds, shattering records and defying Hitler's propaganda on the world's biggest stage. That'll do it for this week. You can hear more of this series at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts. Make sure to leave a rating and a review. We want to hear from you. For Colin, Marie, and Jared, I'm Brett Baer. We'll see you next time.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.